industry. He would first attain political office as a Texas congressman in 1966, but then lose his bid as a Texas senator in 1970. It was at this time that Nixon appointed Bush as an ambassador to the United Nations. According to official accounts, Bush then began work with the CIA as its director in 1976. Evidence suggests that Mr. Bush and the CIA actually had a much longer-standing relationship.
There are indications that he had relations to the CIA before. There's a very strange memo, and the name's George Bush. And when this was published, there was a lot of fuzzing of the issues, but given George H.W. Bush's strong connections with the Cuban community, I think there is a good chance that it was the George Bush we know, so that he did have a CIA connection.
Bush left the CIA just under a year after his appointment. He is credited with restoring the agency's morale, as its image was being shattered by the Church Committee's revelations of the CIA's unauthorized activities involving assassinations and corruption. In reality, Bush was responsible for denying the Church Committee many of the documents it requested and making it impossible for them to do a thorough investigation. After his time as CIA director, he devoted himself to becoming the next president of the United States. Many people within his own party did not like his globalist ties.
Along the campaign trail, Bush continually had to explain his association with the group.
You know J.R. Ewing in the show Dallas? J.R. is a member of the Trilateral Commission, I think. It's got to be because it's so bad. Let me tell you something. I used to be a member of it. I resigned, as I did from every business thing I was in, to concentrate on one thing, running for President of the United States.
Ronald Reagan initially had no interest in having Bush as his running mate.
Even then presidential candidate Ronald Reagan had questions.
I would suggest that maybe Mr. Bush would clear the air if he'd tell us why he resigned.
Reagan's backers then forced him to choose their intelligence frontman, George H.W. Bush, as his vice president.
But in spite of last year's campaign rhetoric, all seems to be back to normal between George Bush and his old colleagues. And President Reagan, who is relying on many of these powerful business leaders to make his economic package work, will host commission representatives at the White House Monday.
After Reagan's election, there was an attempt on his life, just 69 days into office. Astoundingly, Bush would again be connected.
So just who is John Hinckley, Jr.?
When he left this neighborhood 8 years ago, he was, by all accounts, well-liked and seemingly normal.
This donut shop near the motel was visited by Hinckley, who reportedly waited for a phone call here each day, even though he had a phone in his motel room. The nature of the calls is not known.
A touch of irony. The young man walking with the elder Hinckley is 30-year-old Scott Hinckley, John Jr.'s brother. He and Vice President Bush's son, Neil, are friends. They had planned to have dinner together in Denver tonight. The plans have been canceled.
We were told Hinckley was a madman acting alone. If that was the case, why was he making phone calls from a payphone down the road instead of his hotel room? Why was the would-be assassin's brother a family friend of the man who stood to gain the presidency? While Reagan led the nation in the public eye, Bush exploited his power through the largely unknown Continuity of Government Directive.
In the United States federal government, there is a super-secret agency which controls this shadow government.
The National Program Office allowed Bush and his network to attain executive emergency powers.
Ronald Reagan authorized the National Program Office when he signed a top-secret directive in 1982. Oliver North was one of the key officers responsible for the program's startup. Under the NPO's direction, 4 agencies were charged with execution of the Doomsday Plan: the CIA, the Departments of State and Defense, and the Federal Emergency Management Agency.
An effort was being made to consolidate continuity of government programs across several major departments of the government under one office.
After 8 years of secret wars, covertly sponsored revolution and assassination had advanced globalist interests and allowed Bush to achieve his lifelong dream by becoming the 43rd president of the United States. The fall of the Soviet Union left the United States as the sole superpower in the world. The Wolfowitz Doctrine stated, "We must maintain the mechanism for deterring potential competitors from even aspiring to a larger regional or global role." The New World Order was on display with the First Gulf War and the creation of a European Union. After losing to his crony Bill Clinton, he faded into the background as the agenda for a new world order marched forward.
After 1989, President Bush said, and it's a phrase that I often use myself, that we needed a new world order.
We have just exposed many of the globalist operations, including drug dealing, funding terror, dealing arms, and taking over the United States government by stealth. Whenever these agendas were threatened, those who opposed them ended up dead.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you very much.
Gave a paper about all three of the big assassinations in the 60s, which was John F. Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, and Martin Luther King. And there are certain common denominators. I call these events deep events. We've become accustomed to the idea that every now and then something is going to happen, and we just know from the beginning we're not going to get to the bottom of it. And the more they happen, the more reconciled we've become to this state of affairs.
In 1978, the House Select Committee on Assassinations could not ignore there was a conspiracy in regards to the assassination of John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King, Jr.
Good evening. A congressional committee has concluded that President John Kennedy and civil rights leader Martin Luther King, Jr., both of them, were probably killed as the result of conspiracies. The House Assassinations Committee wound up its 2-year study by recommending that the Justice Department look into both cases.
In the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, the committee concluded the likelihood of conspiracy. The committee's summary of findings says President Kennedy was probably assassinated as a result of a conspiracy, that its evidence establishes a high probability that 2 gunmen fired at the motorcade. The committee concluded that President Kennedy did not receive adequate Secret Service protection in Dallas, that the CIA was deficient in sharing information before and after, that the Justice Department and Warren Commission failed to pursue possible conspiracies and made their conclusions too definite.
There seems to be no debate that the CIA and Secret Service were involved in the assassination, as you can clearly see 2 Secret Service agents being taken away from their positions at the back of Kennedy's vehicle just moments before the assassination. And no matter what you believe about Oswald, it has now been declassified that Oswald was trained by the CIA in 1957 under the cover of the Office of Naval Intelligence. These political assassinations continue to this day.
The 11-person jury in the inquest must decide if these stills, never before seen of Diana in the Mercedes and then the crash, are the frantic moments after a tragic accident or the aftermath of a calculated murder.
Mr. Al-Fayed?
Mohammed Al-Fayed, Dodi's father, has long since made up his mind.
I believe that my son and Princess Diana have been murdered by the royal family.
He claims Diana was pregnant and about to announce her engagement to his son, an embarrassment so great, he says, that Prince Philip commissioned British Secret Service to kill the couple.
Assassination is an option when the ruling class can identify an enemy who cannot be compromised. But how do they bend the population's will to do their bidding?
Well, a false flag operation is one in which the attacker carries the flag of someone else. It's usually a military operation, and the purpose, of course, is to create the impression that the attacker is someone else. They want to create negative public opinion against the nation whose flag was being used. Or they may even not use a flag at all. This sort of thing is done all the time, and it's certainly not unique in history. I think we've been seeing a lot of it lately. Americans are easily motivated by false flag operations, and I think it's inevitable that we will see false flag operations in the near future.
It is used in order to seize power at an accelerated pace. A very well-documented modern example of this is the Tonkin Gulf incident.
There were 2 sets of Tonkin Gulf incidents. The first one on August 2nd were real but trivial. The second on August 4th, 2 days later, were the ones to which we actually sent planes off in retaliation and were